Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. I'm very excited to have another guest today. This is episode 30, and I'm very humbled that we are able to continue this show about A Gift from Adversity. Before I introduce our guest tonight, I want to introduce you my book, which is A Gift from Adversity. I published this book in 2020 and it became Amazon #1 new release in 3 different categories. The subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. And I experienced all of this growing up in Japan. And I came to America, and this is the story that I wrote about my life. It's available on Amazon, and I'm very excited to have a book about my adversity and also to have this podcast and having guests from all over the world. Today we have Fred Rutman, and he is coming from Toronto, Canada. Hi,
Hi,
Fred. Thank
Juri.
you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. I was reading a little bit about your story, and it's just amazing the adversity you've gone through.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been a big challenge in my life, and then I feel like writing this book and then doing this show really brought me to a different place in my life where I can share my adversity without the stigma. So, Fred, can you introduce yourself, your name, and what you do to our audience?
Sure. My name is Fred Rutman, and I'm on a permanent medical disability right now because of all the adversity I've gone through. And I'm trying to be a little bit of a copycat of you because I'm trying to write a book about my adversity. And for those in the audience who have never written a book, oh my God, it is so much harder than you could imagine. So kudos to you for doing this. My story starts in the summer of 2009 when I had a bunch of episodes where I collapsed and hit my head. And it took the doctors a number of months to figure out what was happening to me. And what was happening to me was my heart was actually stopping and I was clinically dead about 20 times. So, clinically dead means your heart has stopped for 30 seconds or more and you've stopped breathing. So, they eventually figured out what was going on. It's called a full heart block or a third-degree heart block. And that means the electrical system in your heart essentially shuts down. So, there's nothing to send the electrical signals that tell your atria and your ventricles to pump blood. So your heart stops, your blood pressure goes to zero, you have no blood or oxygen in your brain, and you collapse. And in my case, hit your head repeatedly and repeatedly. So they finally gave me a pacemaker to replace the signals that weren't going through anymore. And that was the start of this adventure. But unfortunately, with a condition like mine, there was no roadmap to recovery. So nobody gave me an MRI to check my brain or my neural. I didn't have a neurological test. Um, I had all these deficits. I lost an entire language out of my brain. My speech was impaired. I was slurring my words. My balance was gone. My depth perception was gone. My fine motor control was gone. And nobody in the medical community came forward and said, here's a program for you. This is how you should be recovering for this. So I had to figure it out all on my own. And I went back to things that had worked for me before, uh, being mostly exercise and trying to learn complicated things. So I went back to school and got a certification in social media. Um, Before all this happened, I was a college professor. I taught business, all sorts of courses, probably about 20 different courses. And a lot of that got wiped out of my brain as well from all these concussions. So I basically had to relearn everything. And
Well, Fred, thank you so much for introducing yourself and then sharing your adversity. So, before we dive in more to your adversity part of it, and do you have any website or social media that they can find more about your story?
I'm just starting to get into the social media.
Yes.
So I have an Instagram, which I think you can see on screen. So my friend Deanna lovingly gave me the nickname Repeatedly Dead Fred, because that's what I was. I was repeatedly dead. And so you can go to my Instagram and find me there, or you can email me at repeatedly.dead.fred@gmail.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much for sharing that. So, Fred, you are in Toronto, Canada, and I
Mhm.
know the hospital system is a little bit different than America. So, when these medical challenges were happening, um, did you have any like doctors or therapists or friend, like support system that you were counting on? Like, how was it like when you were going through these medical challenges?
Well, I'm fortunate that I do have a very good circle of friends and family that were able to contribute, but um, they they're limited in what they can do because if the doctors don't have a path for you to journey down, uh, your lay friends certainly don't. So while I was supported, my situation wasn't really changing because I still couldn't work and I still wasn't back to normal. And I still have that same core group of friends and family to this day, 12 years later. And um, I probably wouldn't been able to survive this without them. So
Yes.
I can't emphasize enough to anybody going through whatever your trauma, even if it's not exactly like mine or yours, surrounding yourself with good people makes it so much easier.
Yes, I totally understand. So now let's go back to the adversity part of it. So you were healthy, you are absolutely functioning fine, and then 12 years ago, like suddenly this happened.
Yes, correct. So I've always had a weight problem. In the early 2000s, I was morbidly obese. I went up to 340 pounds, and then I lost a significant amount of weight. But this is not related to my problems with weight. The doctors actually don't know what caused this because it's usually something that presents itself in men in their 70s, not men in their, mid 40s. That was one of the reasons they didn't pick it up was because I wasn't old enough to have this, so they weren't looking for it.
And then what was your final diagnosis again?
It was called a full heart block. So you can go on the Cleveland Clinic website. The Cleveland Clinic is the premier cardiac hospital in America. And if you put in to whatever search bar you're using, Cleveland Clinic full heart block, you'll get a nice video from one of the doctors there explaining what a full heart block is. And it's like a 3 or 5 minute video. It's nothing, but it makes it a lot easier to understand than whatever I can say to you, the audience. So, um, so I worked on myself and I exercised and I studied lots and I learned lots and I was making some progress and I was feeling like I could go back to teaching again. And then this happened all over again. So I was out riding my bike one time in a park far, far away from where I live. And then all of a sudden, I was on the ground again and unconscious. And this happened a few dozen more times. And the doctors again couldn't figure out what was happening because I had the pacemaker, which is, supposed to prevent this from happening. And they kept testing the pacemaker and not seeing any flaws. Um, and then a couple of months into this, one of the doctors just happened to put his hand over the pacemaker and push, and he saw that it disrupted the pacemaker. So what had happened is the pacemaker has two wires for me that run to my heart that carry the signals from the pacemaker to the heart. I guess I should have explained that the pacemaker is like a little supercomputer that replaces the beating of your heart. One of the pacemaker leads had cracked, the insulation on it cracked, and it kept shorting out. And when it shorted out, it didn't send the signals, and my heart would stop again. So that was what was happening. So this is, sort of adversity 2.0. So they decided they were going to try and replace the pacemaker lead, and we went in for surgery. And I didn't know now they had switched surgery procedures. So now they do this while you're awake. So they just numb the area, like, when you go to a dentist with lidocaine or whatever they use. And they use some sort of laser scalpel. So you get to see this huge monitor in front of you that keeps track of all your vital statistics. Your heart rate and your blood pressure and stuff like that. And I knew before it showed up on the board that my heart had stopped again, and then I was gone. And I came to. They revived me with something called, I call them pacing pads. I can't remember what they're actually called, but they send a current through your body to replace the signal that's not the electrical signal that's not going through. And it hurts. It really, really hurts because they err on the caution of giving you too much electricity versus not enough to get your heart to beat. So it feels like you're, getting kicked in the ribs continuously. So it's not very pleasant. And when I realized what had happened, I said to whoever, please stop. This is like unbelievably painful. And they said, shut up. We're trying to save your life. It was a lot more rude than shut up. But and then another doctor says, no, don't shut up. We want to know that you're okay. So this went on for I don't know how long, and they decided they had to get a temporary pacemaker, which they thread up through your femoral artery into your heart, and all the chaos that was going on, because it's not like on a TV show or in a movie when the 8 people you need to be on this trauma team just shows up immediately, and they have all the medications and all the right tools to do everything. This was a little bit of a mishmash, and then people didn't know where to find a temporary pacemaker, and then they only brought back half of it, and they had to go back and find the other half, and it was just insane. But in all that confusion, somebody was supposed to have sterilized my groin and put in some numbing medication because they were going to have to cut me open so that they could insert the new pacemaker wire, and they forgot to do that. So that was an incredibly painful experience again that I wouldn't want to go through, nor would I wish it on anybody. But they finally did it, and but I was left, not having had my actual condition repaired. So the temporary pacemaker was in such a precarious position that I was on bed rest for a week. I was not allowed to move because they were worried it would disconnect from my heart. And I had to wait until they made sure I didn't get an infection from where they cut me open. and then we went for round two. So round two, this is actually supposed to be a 25-minute procedure because they do about 800,000 pacemaker insertions a year across the world. And they've been doing this for 30, 40 years. So they've got it down. So when stuff like this happens to me, it's just off the charts rare. So the uh, second attempt at this surgery, the doctors could not get the new wire in to replace the old one. And I was on the operating table for hours. And I'd wake up because I would fall asleep because they were, you know, doing whatever they were trying to do. And I'd wake up and the doctor was on a video chat with another doctor halfway around the world trying to figure out, a workaround for this. And I don't know what exactly they did at the end, but somehow they got it in. And apparently I was cured, so to speak. And I had a functioning pacemaker again. And but then I had to go through all the rehab and everything that I did the first time. So I had to, you know, do some higher end learning and more exercise and all those sorts of things. And again, I was just about ready to go back to work when in 2018 this happened all over again, if that makes sense. And the lead cracked. And what we've learned subsequently is that I had the vein that they slide the lead through had collapsed. And that's likely what it was now too tight, and that's likely what caused the lead to crack. And this is just a theory. We can't prove it, but we think something happened in the first surgery back in 2009 that forced the vein to collapse, and it just didn't damage the lead enough until a few years later, and then everything went crazy. So in this 2018 surgery, of course, it didn't go according to plan. The plan was supposed to be just put in an entire new pacemaker on the right side of my chest with two new leads, and we would turn this one off. But again, they couldn't get one of the leads in. So the doctors were again like, how do we fix this? So they eventually figured out a system where the sensors on the new pacemaker would recognize when the old pacemaker failed and they would kick in. But it's not an exact science. So I had many episodes after that where I'd have, 10, 20, 30 seconds of my heart stopping or going into afibrillation because the sensors were, not coordinating well. Eventually, we got it, down to a science, and I haven't had an incident for a year. So I'm pretty happy about that. The downside is that the battery in the original pacemaker is going to die soon, and I'm going to have another surgery. So I'm not really looking forward to that and what mayhem might come after that.
Well, Fred, thank you so much for sharing that with our audience. And I am very sorry that repeatedly happened to you. So, have you ever counted how many times that your heart stopped at this point?
We think it's around 60.
Wow.
So sometimes, it would have happened while I was sleeping anyway. So I wouldn't really have been aware of it. And, it'll make for a good book, hopefully.
So, have you ever met people around the world who has endured this full heart block conditions?
That's not something I've ever asked my cardiologists, but it's a good question. I don't think it's uncommon, but I don't know that, because mostly it happens, as I said, with men in their 70s. So, that's not a group of men I tend to hang out with and know what is going on with them medically. But you've made me think. But I am going to send my cardiologist an email and ask how common this uh, affliction is.
Yes, I have no idea, but I'm a journalist and I've covered some rare disease stories. And then some of the disease that's very rare, it's called Phelan-McDermid syndrome. And one of my friend's son has it. And then it's deletion of chromosome 22 and I think 22 or 23, I'm sorry. But anyways, one of the chromosome is deleted. And then but they didn't know the diagnosis until later on
Mhm.
his life, my friend's son's life. Now, I think the cases were a few hundred when he was diagnosed like 18 years ago, but now it's over 2,000 cases. Now they have the foundation, they have a Facebook group page. So you might have some Facebook private group, closed group. I'm not
Mhm.
sure, but I'm just curious to see how many cases are there in the world for full heart block condition. I've never heard of it. And again, your case is very young and then rare. However, there might be cases for women or maybe younger generations, and I don't know what is causing this. Have you ever discussed the doctor what is the cause of this full heart block, and do they kind of have an answer or not really?
They do not have an answer. I get my pacemaker checked every 3 months, and not every time is the surgeon around to visit. But I keep asking him, any idea? Because they're learning new things all the time. Nope, we don't know why your heart stopped. We don't know why it started again all these times. So
And do you, when your heart stops and then going to kind of unconscious mode, and then when you come back, so sometimes people say, "Okay, I saw some white light or like some visions or something." Do you have anything like that?
I wish I did, because it's a much better story. Um, and I did not. I What I experienced, I will call a brain quake, and I would feel my it would feel like my brain was just like shaking like crazy for a second and a half, and then I was just gone. Everything faded to black, and then whatever time period passed, then I would start to come back to life. Um, so the dying part was relatively easy. The coming back to life part was horrific, actually. Um, what I remember from that is seeing it was like being in the middle of the most intense fireworks display you could ever imagine. So the colors were so bright that even though I was unconscious, they were hurting my eyes. And I could actually feel all the explosions. So I was like getting battered around and battered around. And I don't know how long this lasted, but it was certainly unpleasant. And you don't feel good for a number of days after you come back to life from something like this. I did have a couple of out of body experiences that are also pretty strange. You feel yourself. So I don't know if that's your soul trying to escape from your body and ascend to, well, heaven, hopefully, uh, or it's just some weird trick that your brain plays on you. But I've definitely seen myself, lying on the ground in a number of positions, feeling very confused, and or I guess my whatever was looking down on me feeling very confused, not knowing what to do. And then, fortunately, I came back to life.
So I've never had that many times, but I had one time that I completely passed out from massive blood loss from miscarriage in the bathroom. So I lost
Oh,
more than 50% of blood in the bathroom in an hour, and I was I remember like it was just like massive circulation. It's almost like all the walls are wobbling, and then all of a sudden I just passed out. But then when I gained the conscious, when the EMT got there, my blood pressure was 60 on high, so I was just dying. I was shock
Holy.
state. Then
Yeah.
I started to gain consciousness. I remember like feeling like, oh my gosh, I feel like I slept like 7 days or something. It was like the longest sleep ever, or like maybe the deepest like sleep
Mm.
that I felt. And but anyways, it's very, very scary experience. And then I just want to move on to the tools that you use to overcome these repeatedly dead adversity that you have to endure. What are the tools that you use to maybe overcome this adversity?
So besides the exercise, which is generally good for everybody, and learning, which is generally good for everybody, um, in February of 2018, I was in my cardiologist's office, and he came into the exam room and he threw a book at me. And the name of this book is The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung. And he's a nephrologist here in Toronto, a kidney specialist. And um, he uses intermittent fasting to help reverse type 2 diabetes in many of his patients. He's world famous for what he's doing now. And my cardiologist said, buy this, read this, do this, but only after we talk to all your other doctors and get clearance from all of them, because there could be things that with intermittent fasting that might not have worked for you. So it took about 2 months for all my doctors to get on board with this, and that's when I started. And the cardiologists at the time uh, really were just looking at intermittent fasting as a weight loss tool, and they really didn't understand that there's an entire other side of intermittent fasting that starts all these processes and epigenetic processes going on in your body that helps you heal like you couldn't believe. So that's that's been primarily what I've been doing along with the exercise and learning for the last 3 or 4 years. Um, it was so effective for me that I ended up being a moderator in a Facebook group with about 335,000 members. So there aren't many questions about intermittent fasting that I can't answer. I'm sure there are. And I guess just a little medical disclaimer. Um, if you're going to try something like intermittent fasting and you're on medications or anything like that, please check with your appropriate doctors before you do stuff, because your medications may have to be adjusted as you go. Mine certainly were. Um, and in general, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding or you've had a history of eating disorders, it's probably not a good idea to go into the intermittent fasting world.
So I've heard of intermittent fasting, and how does it work? It's like 8 hours. You can eat within like 8 hours or something.
That's one of the protocols. There's actually dozens of ways you can do it, which is good because we all have different lives and we all have different bio individuality. So the protocols that work for me might not necessarily work for you, or somebody much older than you, uh, or somebody who's just been pregnant, or whatever the situation. And especially if you've been overweight your entire life, or been a yo-yo dieter, intermittent fasting seems to want to heal your body first and get everything regulating properly before it gets into the weight loss part. So when I started, I was fasting 12 hours and had an eating window of 12 hours. And because we didn't know what was going to happen with me, so we went very conservatively. And it worked really well. within, I think, 3 months, I was able to do 24-hour fasts. And I should mention these aren't dry fasts. So you can drink plain water, black coffee, green tea, no sweeteners, no cream, no cinnamon, no lemon, stuff like that. So and then I went from there, and I've lost probably 10 pant sizes, in about a year. So it was pretty quick for me.
Wow. So are you still doing intermittent fasting?
I am. Um, and I've got some other adversity. I went through COVID last April, and I had a particularly nasty case. And the COVID affects your gut biome. And so it's been quite difficult for me to get back to the levels of fasting that I was doing before. But I'm making progress, and I'm sure I'll be back on track very, very soon.
So what do? You just don't eat 12 hours?
Now I do more longer fasts, so I eat 22 hours, and then I'll have 2 hours that I can eat. That doesn't mean you eat for 2 hours straight or 12 hours straight or whatever your eating window is. That just means you can have your one meal a day, or your meal and a snack, or meal and a snack and dessert, or however you want to work it, um, during that, what we call the eating window. So some people do much longer fasts, a couple of times a week. They do alternate day fasting. And uh, before I got COVID, I was doing a 40-hour fast twice a week.
Wow.
So, and those are fun. It's a little more of a mental game than a physical game,
Mhm.
because once your body gets all your hormones stabilized and operating the way, you're very much more in touch with things like your hunger signals and satiety signals. So you understand what true hunger is, and you understand when you're full and it's time to stop eating. And a lot of us on the standard North American diets, um, we're eating so much sugar and bad fats and oils and things like that, that our body just can't send us the signals we need to live our best life.
Yes, I've done master cleansing, 7 days master cleansing with water, lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and
Mhm.
maple syrup twice in my life, and that was like mental, yes, problems and stuff. But it actually helped my gut, intestine, digestion a lot.
For
Prior to
sure.
that, yeah, prior to the master cleansing, I really had digestion problems. So then after that, I really never had the digestion problem after the first one. And then the second one, it was easier, much easier
Mhm.
than the first one. I thought I was gonna die, but the second one was like, no, I knew what to expect. So I was maybe gonna
Mhm.
go to day 8, but then I just said no, I should eat. So I went back. But I've definitely heard of intermittent fasting and then heard some really great effects. So I'm really happy that it's working for you and then it's
Mhm.
helping you.
Mhm.
And thank you so much for sharing. Now, let's actually move on to our last question, which is a gift that came from the adversity. So, how would you describe a gift that came from this?
I think the gift that's come from this is I went down this journey, and I actually found intermittent fasting and have learned how much it can help people. So I've become an intermittent fasting coach, and I've helped probably hundreds of people, um, whether it's getting rid of an autoimmune disease, or their hair stops falling out, or they lose weight, or all the inflammation in their body goes away like it did for me. There's just so many things that it does as a byproduct of fasting, and I get to change people's lives for the positive now. You know, Before I was a professor, so I help kids, get a career path, and hopefully gave them some wisdom. But this is something, you get to see people's quality of life improving. And I find that incredibly rewarding.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I totally appreciate you willing to share this knowledge that you actually use to overcome your adversity and these medical challenges. Because so many people who had maybe discovered these tools that worked for them, maybe they don't think it's important to share, but I think it's very important to share. Just like I'm doing
Mhm.
with that podcast, where I wanted to create a safe platform where people can talk about adversity and tools and then gift that came from it without having any stigma.
Mhm. For sure. I think you're doing an amazing thing.
Thank you very much, Fred. So, what is your last word for our audience?
Oh, um, there's a psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl that came through the Holocaust. I forget the name of his book, which I shouldn't, but Man's Search for Meaning might be. But one of his quotes is, if you have hope, you can overcome anything. And I believe that's true. And it's not like hope is, like gas prices now, there's a limited supply. There's as much hope as you want to grab onto and as you can grab onto that can help prepare you, or propel you into the future to get where you need to be.
Well, great. Thank you very much for coming to A Gift from Adversity tonight. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. My pleasure as well. Have a good
Absolutely.
night.
Yes. And thank you for our audience for tuning into another episode of A Gift from Adversity. And then we have more guests coming in the month of March and April and then May. And I'm very excited to host all the guests that are coming in the past. And you can check out A Gift from Adversity on Facebook and Anchor.fm and then Spotify. See you next time.